Arrow's last full season just finished airing. It's kind of upsetting that we'll never have an episode of Arrow in May ever again. Ever since the end of season 1, it's been kind of a tradition that Oliver, Team Arrow, and just the population of Star City in general will probably be in mortal danger and have shit hit the fan at this time of year. So much so that it became somewhat of a meme, with characters on the show itself referencing how May is when this Earth should probably brace itself. And this season being the last full season definitely meant that there was a lot of finality and just end-like feelings going around. The final episode literally felt like a final episode of the show, and set season 8 up to be more like a Crisis on Infinite Earths prequel than a real Arrow season. But I'll be honest, despite this being a pretty big theory right now, I'm expecting season 8 to still be very much one of the same. This is the CW, they're not known for shaking shows up too much. Maybe I'll talk about this in another video, but I just don't think that they're going to do an Oliver with the Monitor kind of season. Anyway, the final episode really summed up a lot of my feelings on this season, and I'll be honest and say that they're not really that positive. The final episode was rushed, messy, didn't make much sense, had half the episode devoted to boring flash forwards filled with characters I didn't care about, and overall felt like it had no direction, and they just wanted an action set piece or fight scene every 2 minutes. And overall that is basically what this season was in a nutshell. Now I'll give them credit, the first half of the season for the most part was very enjoyable. The Slabside arc was a welcome change to normal season arcs, gave us a very interesting plot development and interactions, and overall I think it was one of the strongest first halves that Arrow has ever had. But to be honest, Arrow has never really had any spectacular or crazy good first half. The show's plot generally picks up around the mid-season, and while they can have some really good episodes in their first half, nothing really too crazy happens. Like, if you talk to anybody about their top 10 Arrow episode lists, most of the episodes will always be from a second half of the season rather than a first half of the season. That said, I would rank 7-8 up there with the first halves of seasons 1 to 3, which are all also really good. Unfortunately, after the Slabside arc ends, the season seems to lose all sense of direction and kind of collapses in on itself. The writers can't seem to decide if they want a main villain or not, if they want to keep Diaz around or not, if they want a new Suicide Squad, or if they just want a new character like Dante. The season is full of plot holes that start off strong, but the writers seem to lose interest in them and give them bad endings, write them out, or just forget about them completely. Now, I do think that a lot of these stuff is going to come back into play in season 8, but the way that they're portrayed this season, it's like they're supposed to be a big part of this season, and then the writers just decide not to make them a big part of this season, which is pretty frustrating. Such as Diaz, the Ghost Initiative, Dante, the Ninth Circle, Archer, the Longbow Hunters, all plotlines that start off intriguing, and they start off well, but are pushed off in favor of more stories that are deemed more interesting by the writers, which is really frustrating and will mean that this season doesn't hold up too well on rewatches when you know that a lot of these storylines don't get a proper ending. Even the other not-so-great Arrow seasons like 3, 4, and 6 all feel way more focused. They all have endings to the stories that they start in those seasons, and they all feel like they have a plan in place. Despite the questionable writing of those years, it feels like the writers decided an endgame from the beginning of those seasons. This season really feels like the plot was just written as they went along. I'm not trying to say this is the worst season of Arrow, because it's not, but none of this season stands out, despite how enjoyable Slabside the 150 was. I don't think any of this season's highs beat season 6 or 3's highs, and I personally think this season's lows are lower than their lows too. It's not worse than season 4, that's clear, but I do think this is my second least favourite season of Arrow ever. The flash forwards are another problematic point. They started out strong, and the reveal that we were actually following future characters made early season 7 one of the most interesting mysteries this show has had. But as more characters got introduced, I slowly realised that a lot of the flash forwards was just more of the same, and I didn't really like any of it. Most of the characters were written terribly, the set designs were just bad, I didn't like the constant dark grey setting or the weird futuristic music that played. Everything is even more frustrating when you remember that Oliver Queen dies and his city goes to complete shit. That's a problem these shows constantly have. They always paint the future in a bad light. In Flash, for example, both Nora's timeline, the timeline where Iris died, all of it is a bad future. In Legends of Tomorrow, with Zari, her timeline is terrible. The 2040s for her as well is just a bad time. And that's a problem that these shows they can't get over for some reason. It makes it so hard to get invested in the present day plot when you know in the end it's all for nothing. There's a lot of unfinished story with many of the flash forward characters, and this means Season 8 will also have to delve into this, and if the rumours about the possible spin-off about 2040 Star City is true, that means that this future is set in motion, and that Oliver's passing in Crisis really doesn't mean anything for his team, for his characters, for his children. It's a spit in the face to the character and his team, having saved Star City for 7 seasons straight. It will also most likely be the first Arrowverse show I completely pass on watching. I also need to bring up Emiko, Dante, and by association, I guess the Ninth Circle. These are all relatively new characters in the Green Arrow mythos, with Dante and the Ninth Circle only being around since 2016. This seems to be a pattern in the shows lately as well. Red Death and Godspeed were both introduced on Flash or referenced on Flash, and they are also very recent additions to the comics. I was intrigued by Emiko's appearance early on in the season, because in the comics her character is very similar to Thea, how Thea is on the show. And parallels are very easy to draw for her first couple of episodes. She's a great character, and while skeptical to see her appear, I was interested to see what they did with her character. And initially I was happy with how they were doing it. Unfortunately, the writers ended up doing her a huge disservice by making her the villain of the season, and then completely flip-flopping by redeeming her in the final 2 minutes she had in the entire show. I would much rather that they committed to either making her a good character or a bad character, doing one or the other because it cheapens the writing and the character by switching it so easily. The Ninth Circle survived the season to seemingly live another day, and most likely show up as antagonists next season, which is another thing I'm not happy about. If we were going to have a big bad next season, which I'm skeptical on that too, I think they might have next season not have a big bad. I want it to be a personal one, and I really mean something that means something to the 8-year history of the show, and not be a group that we really didn't even know about until the recent episodes. And even when we did know of the Ninth Circle, they were nothing. They were incompetent, and they were even more useless than this universe's version of the League of Assassins. So Arrow Season 7 unfortunately ended the same way that it lived. A weak, rushed, and muddled mess that was hard to follow and just all around wasn't very good. And unfortunately, besides Supergirl, that seems to be the status quo for the shows this year. I think Flash and Legends have been pretty poor for the most part as well. I really hope Arrow picks up in Season 8, because it would suck to look back on the show in 5 years and realize that Season 6 to 8 all weren't very good. And I think this season deserves a 6 out of 10. But thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I hope you have an awesome day.